Everyone. Some big news since we last spoke. The Supreme Court has overturned Roe versus Wade, meaning that, well, abortion is not illegal in the United States, but the federal government no longer recognizes this, which means it's up to the states now. And on that, too, you have about 24 states stepping forward and suggesting they are going to ban abortion. Doesn't mean that other states can't allow it still if they choose to, and many still are. But it started a big discussion in this country, and part of the backlash, interestingly, has just totally laid waste to a lot of the left's narratives, as far as I'm concerned. It has laid waste to their narratives on race, because they're saying some of the most racist things I've ever heard, because Clarence Thomas, of course, a black American justice, was one of the main people who, overturned Roe versus Wade, and some of the racist comments against him are ridiculous. I won't name those today, but you can use your imagination. They're calling them every name in the book. They have absolutely destroyed the January 6th narrative. I'm going to go really in-depth into that. They've destroyed the narratives on extremism, domestic extremism, and today I'm going to really go over a lot of this with you. I'm going to show you how they're just wrecking their own narratives because they can't control themselves. Really, they're making death threats. They're making threats of violence against average Americans. They're threatening to go into target Christian neighborhoods in the suburbs. They're talking about firebombing. They're talking about, they're not killing people per se, but using violence against people. Some posts are actually talking about killing people. Meanwhile, big tech is actually censoring on their behalf. They're allowing these types of posts to be spread while they're banning people for significantly less on the other side. Wikipedia is altering articles, altering content to remove information, for example, on Jane's Revenge, showing that they are a domestic terrorist organization, and even the Department of Homeland Security has identified them as such. I'm going to show you how they're altering information. They're removing information that would make them look very bad. And I'm going to also show you how the Revolutionary Communist Party, USA, which advocates for the forceful overthrow of the United States government, and pushes for actively destabilizing the government, is actually working right alongside Cortez, AOC, on some of these protests, and how they also run one of the main Antifa branches. I'm going to really go in-depth into this, folks, because what you're watching right now is the death of a narrative. All right, that said, let's jump into the first story. Real quick, though, those of you on YouTube, remember, again, we only do 20 minutes of the show on YouTube, Rumble. After that, we'll jump over to Epic TV exclusively. They've been deleting my content. They've been deleting my videos. The one we did just recently on sudden adult death syndrome I mentioned before, not only did they delete that, but they gave me a strike for it. So we actually can't even post on our Crossroads highlights channel. We couldn't post right after it for a bit. So on that note, we're giving you a free 14-day trial. Jump in the description, get your 14-day free trial, and again, full episodes, hour and a half, are on Epic TV. All right, that said, folks, let's jump into the first story for the day. I want to really go in depth into what's happening with this Roe v. Wade, being overturned, and what this means for the country. Those of you curious, also, today's tea is a Taiwanese oolong tea. All right, folks, let's go into it. Now, I want to show you a video first off. This is Antifa. They're protesting. This is in Washington. Live in D.C., at least when this happened. I'm going to show you this video real quick. We'll play it. There you go. There's your Antifa. It's actually a very small protest, and my kind of view on seeing this is that maybe the main force isn't out there. Maybe the people getting paid to go and burn down cities isn't the one being deployed on this. This seems almost like a very small, more grassroots version of this, which has me wondering about the bigger game behind this. Is not to say some of the more organized groups are not involved, because they absolutely are. Again, Revolutionary Communist Party USA being one of the main ones. But this is interesting, though. That I just showed you this Antifa video. That's Antifa out in force. They are calling for violence. I'm going to show you some of this. It's interesting because former Attorney General Barr, turned anti-Trump and has really been making some very bizarre statements, in my opinion, things that are frankly making me really question his, frankly, integrity. They claim, he and many other people are claiming that there's not a double standard when it comes to prosecutions. Because a lot of people ask, well, why were people getting away with burning down cities and committing murder and declaring a Chaz site? Remember in Seattle and in Portland, I believe, too. The left, Antifa and other groups, BLM, they even declared several blocks as being autonomous, where they literally, by definition, launched an insurrection, even taking over a police department, even seizing the firearms from a police department, distributing firearms in the police. The warlord of the Chaz or Chop site was never arrested, as far as I know. Bizarre stuff like that. And people were getting shot and killed, raped, everything, you name it. Businesses were being extorted. They were extorting businesses for money. That kind of stuff was taking place. Most of it was not prosecuted. Some people did get prosecuted, most of it was not. And, one thing that William Barr said, the former Attorney General, is that, there's not a double standard. It's that the left, they have the tendency to cover their faces. They all wear the same clothes. In other words, it's organized, coordinated crime, i.e. what you would normally call criminal conspiracy. Things that you could get people on for, like, guilty by association or working as a gang. And typically in situations like that, you could prosecute them. You could charge them for committing crimes in conjunction with each other. And again, working in conspiracy to commit those crimes, where they're dressing in masks and part of the same organizations, having plannings and trainings and so on. Now, the narrative on that is an absolute lie. Because we saw something very interesting. We saw how this is different with Patriot Front. And I'm not defending or endorsing Patriot Front by any means. I think, frankly, one of the big jokes about Patriot Front is they're like the Fed front. A lot of people joke that they all look like a bunch of feds. But let me show you this video real quick. This is the Patriot Front. Over 30 of them were arrested at a Pride event in Idaho. Let me show you this. This is a video. We'll see if we can play it. You see, every one of them was arrested. They're basically they're trying to be like right-wing Antifa. They have their khakis, they have their blue shirts, they have their gray masks. In other words, instead of wearing all black, they have their own versions of the uniforms. And their own versions of the uniforms presumably would make them the same as Antifa. The kind of disguise that Barr would describe it that makes them all look the same, so it's very difficult to prosecute them. So what happened? They showed up at this Pride event in Idaho with the video recorded stated intent of just being there peacefully and not doing anything. They just wanted to have a show of force. Every one of them was arrested. 30 of them were arrested, all in conjunction, and they were arrested with conspiracy to protest, like a thought crime. They were arrested with conspiracy to riot. Meaning they didn't even commit a crime. They were arrested for pre-crime. Meanwhile, Antifa can commit crimes, actually carrying out the crimes like in conjunction with each other, and they're not arrested like that. Maybe one of them might get arrested, but again, there's even left-wing groups that bail them out of prison. So, as you can see, there absolutely is a double standard, and we're watching these groups now openly call for even violence. Openly call for protests, openly even call for the assassination of public officials. It is really wild stuff. Now, again, normally if you're acting with a group with the intent to commit a crime, that is called criminal conspiracy. Even if you are part of that group and you're not committing the crime, you can be charged with guilty by association. That's a very common charge you see, for example, if, for example, two individuals break into a home and one of the individuals, let's say, beats or robs or murders someone, the other individual, even though the other individual may not have actually carried out the crime, will be charged with the same crime. That is guilty by association, right? You're acting as like an assistant essentially to the crime. Normally, they would charge you for this. Again, we saw them do that to Patriot Front. We still, to this day, do not see them doing that against Antifa, which, again, destroys the narrative from Andrew Barr, destroys the narrative from much of the left, and really is just one of many examples showing this. Now, let me show you something else. This is the Twitter account of Carlos Maza. He's a leftist YouTuber. This is his. Let me show you his tweet. Let me pull this up. All right, this is how much of the left right now is really pushing their whole narrative. This is what they're doing. Now, this guy has not been banned from Twitter. His tweet is still up. You're looking at it right now. His YouTube page is still up. And he's saying violence is a legitimate and appropriate response to oppression, referring directly to the whole, Roe versus Wade issue. He's directly calling for violence. Now, the irony with many of these people is that, frankly, if it wasn't for the government, if it wasn't for police, the same people they want to like defund and abolish, they frankly wouldn't last a day, because without police protection, these, really shrill-voiced, thin-armed, bug men, I guess you could call them, really could not withstand much. But of course, through government protection, they can do things like this, where they're openly calling for violence, openly advocating for violence, and really trying to incite violence. This is another tweet from the same individual. This guy's YouTube is still up. His Twitter page is still up. This is him again. He says, fascists, literally do not care how you vote. They are not trying to win elections. Violence is the only language they understand, and it's time we start speaking it. It's a direct call for violence. You're looking at his live Twitter page. Not only in normal cases, at the very least, Twitter would ban your post. They'd say, you have a chance to delete your post. It violates our standards, because remember, the whole idea that people were, making posts. I'll give you an example. The idea that people were posting ahead of time on January 6th was grounds not only for people to get banned off social media, but for tech companies, Amazon, Apple, and so on, was grounds for all these companies to delete the entire platform that was Parler. Now, Parlers came back, of course, but because of tweets like this, ironically, it was on Parler, so I don't know if you call them tweets, parlays, I guess they call them, basically tweets. Because people were making statements like this, not only were those people canceled, but the entire platform was canceled. The entire platform was deplatformed by the companies that ran its servers, that ran its, the technology backing it, and the entire website and company were destroyed because of that. Again, a very clear example, one of many, of the serious, really serious violations of code that are recognized on one side and not on the other. But even beyond that, frankly, the fact that people can make actual calls for violence and not even be criminally charged is another thing. Let me show you this. Now, it's beyond just threats, because this is actual advocation for violence. This is a threat of violence. They're not doing anything about it. But there are actual terrorist organizations, and I'm not using that term as a name-calling thing. I mean, recognized by definition, Department of Homeland Security issuing alerts on them, terrorist organizations. And interestingly, these actual terrorist organizations, and I'm not name calling, I'm going to show you the actual DHS documents. Not only are these groups being allowed to hold events, but they're acting with the direct endorsement of Democrat leaders. Now, keep in mind, these are some of the same people. This is the DHS alert, and I'm going to read you some of this. But these are the same people, the Democrat leaders actually endorsing this, who were some of the same people who were calling, for example, for people to be facing criminal charges or FBI investigations, for example, for joining a school board meeting, for expressing discontent over what's being taught to their kids, not making threats. Again, there was no documentation of threats on the school board meetings, no documentation of threats, no police reports, no nothing. But the school board actually went to the Biden administration and to the FBI and requested that parents be investigated, potentially, they said in their own words, as domestic terrorists. And here you have actual domestic terrorists, by definition, recognized directly in this document I'm showing you right here. Recognized directly by the DHS as domestic terrorists, not only being allowed to still hold events, but acting with the direct endorsement of Democrats. Let me go over some of this. It says this. It says here, this is the DHS. This is a leaked DHS alert. I believe CNN published it, but this is the actual document. It says some domestic violent extremists, what they call DVEs, will likely exploit the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade to intensify violence against a wide range of targets. We expect violence could occur for weeks following the release, particularly as DVEs, domestic violence extremists, may be mobilizing in response to changes in state laws and ballot measures on abortion stemming from the decision. We base this assessment on an observed increase in violent incidents across the United States following the unauthorized disclosure in May of a draft majority opinion on the case that was Politico leaked a judge's early, opinions on this. Remember that, which then sparked, as the DHS itself notes, domestic violent extremism, meaning that they caused domestic terrorism essentially. It continues further, and I won't go over all this, but it says federal and state government officials, including judges and facilities, probably are most at risk for violence. So they're acknowledging that federal officials are at risk of violence, that judges are at risk of violence. Judges are at risk of violence. It's something you'd see in cartel land type countries. Government officials are at risk of violence. They're acknowledging, which is really interesting here, they're acknowledging fully now that domestic violent extremism targeting public officials, targeting judges is happening on the left. And not only is it happening on the left, but this is being allowed to take place. They're being allowed to hold protests. They're not being charged or condemned on any grand scale. And not only that, but many of them are acting, again, with the direct endorsement of public officials on the left, which I'll show you in a minute. Now it says, and facilities are also most at risk for violence in response to the decision. In late May, a network of loosely affiliated suspected violent extremists known as Jane's Revenge, that's Jane Roe, who, again, Roe v. Wade was the basis of that case. Interestingly, Jane Roe herself actually came out and admitted that she lied during the Roe v. Wade case. It should have been overturned a long time ago just based on that. She actually came out and admitted that she lied. The whole thing was based on a lie. And she said it was one of the biggest regrets of her life. She actually went to the other side after the whole thing. But, continuing on this, right? And they say it's been linked to arson attacks against the buildings of ideological opponents. Now, it shared a post encouraging a night of rage. You remember that because the night of rage is one of the key words we're going to see going forward. Night of rage following the Supreme Court announcement stating, we need the state to feel our full wrath, and we need them to be afraid of us. Terrorism. An individual is now awaiting trial for a plot in June to kill a U.S. Supreme Court justice in response to the draft opinion. A separate incident in Michigan involved vandalism claimed by Jane's Revenge on a building that houses a U.S. representative's campaign office and a pro-life advocacy group. It continues stating First Amendment protected events following the released decision also probably will be attractive targets for a range of DVEs to commit violence against ideological opponents. It continues stating both reproductive and family advocacy healthcare facilities will likely will continue to remain primary targets for criminal incidents, and violence could escalate against these facilities or personnel. Faith-based organizations across the United States continue to report numerous criminal incidents against religious institutions connected to abortion rights. Now, if most groups were to even spray paint a racist or derogatory symbol or statement on, let's say, a synagogue or a mosque, not only would the individual be arrested merely for spray painting, let's say, a swastika on a synagogue or something like that, or a racist statement on a black church, for example, not only would they be arrested for that, they would be charged with a hate crime. Now, are these individuals directly acknowledged now as being a terrorist organization, targeting Christians in this case? Are they being charged with hate crimes for targeting Christians as the group that they hate and that they're blaming this whole Roe v. Wade case being overturned on? Well, not as far as we're seeing. Again, a serious example, another one, that there's a real double standard in our legal system. Under any normal case, this would be called hate crime, not to mention, as acknowledged by DHS, domestic violent extremism. The other interesting thing about this is it also shows that, frankly, the domestic extremists are on the left. There's no mention here of them on the right. This is specifically on the left. And so, when they're pushing this kind of stuff, you can really see the real, frankly, the truth behind it. It is not what they say it is. Now, this is a terrorist group working not only as a left-wing group, but working with the heavy endorsement from the left, and big tech is already censoring information, covering up on the behalf of this terrorist organization. I'm going to jump over to Epic TV in just a bit, but on that note, so Wikipedia is actually deleting information on them. Wikipedia on Jane's Revenge. I'm going to show you the actual archive of this and what it currently says. They're deleting information. Not only are they deleting information, but the edits page, which normally you can go into the edits page and see what has been changed. I checked it several times and it looks like someone deleted the edits page, so you can't even track the changes they've made. But you can, of course, use archives, which I've went and retrieved for us all to look at, which show that, for example, Wikipedia has removed the information that states that this is a terrorist organization. They're no longer calling it that. They've deleted that, and they've rephrased it now. All right, folks, that said, there's a lot I want to go into still. Not only again, I'm going to show you that AOC herself is actually working with these groups. She's actually working right alongside them. I'm going to show you some of the documents these groups have, calling for the overthrow of the U.S. government, actual insurrection. And I also want to show you some videos in Arizona where they're carrying out almost the exact thing, in terms of crimes, the exact same thing, that people did on January 6th, which is they actually protested at, entered illegally, and disrupted a public hearing at the state capitol. And remember, people are facing 20 years in prison for January 6th for literally disrupting an official proceeding. These individuals disrupted an official proceeding. Will they then be charged similar to the January 6ers? Probably not, because again, there's a double standard. But on that note, this is absolutely destroying their narratives. This is destroying their narratives, and I'm going to explain to you more in depth on that. All right, that said, folks, if you're on YouTube, Rumble, join us on Epic TV. You have a free trial in the description below. Grab that and come join us for the discussion. Before we go, though, I want to show you a quick trailer. 87% of clinical trial data is being hidden from medical journals, according to a former FDA director. Let me show you this real quick before we jump over.
Journal articles misrepresented the data, and the FDA knew that the journals were misrepresenting the data, and the FDA knew that doctors were relying on the misrepresented data to prescribe the drug, and the FDA won't correct those articles. The drug companies are allowed to control what doctors think they know, but in fact they don't know because they haven't had access to the data. And the doctors and the insurers and the health policy people don't understand the extent to which the drug companies are perpetrating the illusion that what they're presenting is science, when in fact it's marketing. It's their version of the science, but it's not independently vetted. So everybody was making money, but the doctors were being cheated of the information that they should have, and the FDA was letting it go on.
Yeah, that's Roman Balmakov's show, Facts Matter. He's doing some great stuff. Again, folks, check that out on Epic TV and come join us now. We still have an hour left on the show. Grab your free trial. Join us now. We'll see you there.